The metal corridors of Station Harmony stretched endlessly in all directions. Hannah Kim walked behind the human delegation, her hand resting on the weapon at her side. She had trained for this moment her entire life, but nothing could have prepared her for the size of the alien space station commander. June Park led their small group of 12 humans through the gleaming hallways. His diplomatic uniform was pressed perfectly, and his face showed no emotion. Behind him walked Ambassador Mira Choi, the woman who would speak for all of humanity today. She carried herself with confidence, but Hannah could see the tension in her shoulders. "Remember," June whispered to the group, "we are guests here. Galactic Council has finally agreed to meet with us after 40 years of requests. Do not give them any reason to change their minds." Hannah nodded along with the others, but her eyes never stopped moving. She studied every doorway, every corner, every place where danger might hide. It was her job to keep these people safe, and she took that job very seriously. The hallway opened into a massive chamber that took Hannah's breath away. The ceiling rose so high she could barely see the top. 12 different species of aliens sat in a circle around a central platform. Each group looked completely different from the others. The Valkyrie delegation sat directly across from where the humans would stand. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes. Their leader, a creature that the humans had been told was called Prime Executor Vex, watched the approaching humans with what might have been curiosity. "Welcome, humans of Earth," a voice echoed through the chamber. The words came from a translation device that made all the alien languages sound like English. "You have requested to join our Galactic Council. Today, we will hear your case." Ambassador Mira stepped forward onto the central platform. "Thank you for this opportunity. We come in peace, hoping to learn from your wisdom and share our own knowledge with the galaxy." Anna positioned herself where she could see the entire chamber. Something felt wrong, but she could not put her finger on what it was. The aliens all seemed polite enough. They asked reasonable questions about human technology, culture, and intentions. But as the questions continued, Hannah began to notice things that bothered her. The way some of the aliens looked at the humans reminded her of predators watching prey. The Valkyrie especially seemed to be studying the humans too carefully, as if they were looking for weaknesses. "Tell us about your military capabilities," Prime Executor Vex said. His voice was smooth and calm, but something in his tone made Hannah's skin crawl. "We have defensive forces to protect our worlds," June replied carefully. "But we seek peace, not conflict, of course," Vex said. "Surely you understand that we must know what kind of weapons you possess, for the safety of the Council." Hannah stepped forward slightly. In her experience, when someone asked about your weapons while claiming to want peace, they were usually planning to use that information against you. But June gave her a sharp look that told her to stay quiet. The questioning went on for hours. The humans answered every question honestly, sharing information about their technology, their populations, their resources. Hannah grew more uncomfortable with each passing minute. When the formal session ended, the aliens invited the humans to stay as guests on the station for 3 days. During that time, they would learn more about each other and hopefully reach an agreement about human membership in the Council. "This is going better than we hoped," Mira said as they walked to their assigned quarters. "They seemed genuinely interested in working with us. They asked a lot of questions about our defenses," Hannah said quietly. "That's normal," June replied. "They need to understand our capabilities. It shows they're taking us seriously." Their quarters were comfortable, but simple. Each human had a small room with a bed, a desk, and a view of the stars outside. Hannah was checking her room when she noticed something that made her freeze. There was a small device attached to the wall near her bed. It was barely visible, hidden behind a decorative panel. But Hannah had seen enough surveillance equipment to know what it was. She checked the other rooms quietly. Every single one had the same device. The aliens were watching them. Hannah went to June's room and knocked softly. When he opened the door, she motioned for him to follow her. She led him to a storage closet where they could speak privately. "They're watching us," she whispered. "Every room has surveillance devices." June frowned. "Are you certain?" "I've seen these things before. Standard listening devices, probably with video capability." That could be normal security procedures, June said, but his voice showed doubt. Commander, I have a bad feeling about this. The Velkhari asked too many questions about our weapons. They're positioning themselves strategically in every room we enter, and now they're spying on us in our quarters. June was quiet for a long moment. Even if you're right, what can we do? Can't accuse them of hostile intentions without proof. That would destroy any chance of joining the council. We need to be ready, Hannah said. Something is wrong here. The next morning brought more meetings and more questions. The aliens seemed friendly enough, but Hannah noticed more troubling signs. The Velkhari warriors always positioned themselves near the exits. Other species seemed nervous when the Velkhari spoke. Several times Hannah caught aliens looking at the humans with what looked like pity. During lunch, she overheard part of a conversation between two Velkhari officers. They were speaking in their own language, but the translation device picked up fragments. Schedule confirmed for tomorrow evening, one said. All units in position, the other replied. Savages suspect nothing. Hannah's blood ran cold. She knew. They were talking about the humans. But when she tried to tell the others, they dismissed her concerns. You're being paranoid, Dr. Kylie said. These beings have been peaceful for thousands of years. They've created a galactic civilization based on cooperation and understanding. Then why are they calling us savages? Hannah asked. Even if they said that, it might just be a translation error, Mira said. We can't let suspicion ruin this opportunity. That evening, Hannah did something she had never done before. She disobeyed a direct order from her commander. Instead of staying in her quarters as instructed, she snuck out to explore the station. What she found in the lower levels changed everything. Hidden in a storage bay, she discovered weapons and equipment that could only be meant for one purpose. The Velkhari were planning an attack, but the worst discovery was yet to come. In a computer terminal she managed to access, she found files that made her hands shake with anger. The Velkhari had done this before, multiple times. Species that had applied to join the council had mysteriously disappeared after their first diplomatic meetings. The humans were next. Hannah ran back to wake the others, her mind racing with plans to save her people. But as she reached their quarters, she realized she might already be too late. Guards were posted outside every human room. Trap was about to close. Hannah crouched behind a supply crate in the darkened corridor, her heart pounding as she watched the Velkhari guards patrol past the human quarters. She had to warn the others, but first she needed to understand exactly what they were facing. The station's lower levels were a maze of maintenance tunnels and storage areas. Hannah moved through them like a ghost, using skills she had learned in the military. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could mean discovery. She found what she was looking for in a restricted data terminal, 3 levels below the diplomatic quarters. The screen showed shipping manifests, but Hannah knew how to read between the lines: weapons shipments, personnel transfers, communication blackouts. Her fingers flew across the alien keyboard as she accessed deeper files. What she found made her stomach turn. The Velkhari had been the real power behind the Galactic Council for centuries. They allowed other species to think they had a voice. But every major decision came from Velkhari leadership. More disturbing were the files about previous first contact missions. The Corvani species had applied to join the Council 15 years ago. Their entire diplomatic team had died in what was reported as a tragic accident. The Nixari had suffered a similar fate 8 years later. In total, 17 species had been eliminated before they could gain full membership. The pattern was always the same. The species would be invited to the station for talks. They would be given quarters in the same section where the humans now slept. Then something would go wrong. An equipment failure, terrorist attack, misunderstanding that turned violent. But the reports always blamed the visiting species. They were described as aggressive, dangerous, unable to adapt to civilized society. The galaxy accepted these explanations because the alternative was too frightening to consider. Hannah copied the files to a small data device and made her way back toward the diplomatic section. She had to move carefully now. More guards were patrolling the corridors, and she could hear the sound of equipment being moved into position. She reached the human quarters just as the morning shift began. The guards had changed, but they were still there. Hannah waited until they moved to the far end of the corridor and slipped into the ventilation system. The air ducts were narrow and uncomfortable, but they led directly to the rooms where her fellow humans slept. She crawled through the metal passages until she reached Dr. Kai Lee's room. Dr. Lee was already awake, sitting at his desk and reading reports about alien biology. Hannah tapped softly on the ventilation grate above his head. "Dr. Lee," she whispered. "It's Hannah. I need to talk to you." He looked up in surprise. "Hannah, what are you doing in there? I can't come out. There are guards everywhere. But I have something important to show you." She dropped the data device through the grate. "Look at those files. The Valkyrie have been killing species that try to join the Council. We're next." Dr. Lee picked up the device and connected it to his computer. As he read, his face grew pale. "This can't be right. The Galactic Council is a peaceful organization. They've had no major conflicts for over 1,000 years. Because they kill anyone who might cause problems," Hannah said. "Look at the pattern. 17 species, all eliminated during first contact. But this could be fake," Dr. Lee said, "or taken out of context. Maybe these species really were dangerous." Hannah wanted to scream. Even with the evidence right in front of him, he refused to believe it. "Dr. Lee, they have guards outside our doors. They're moving weapons into position." "Ow! What more proof do you need?" "The guards are probably just security," he said. "And you might be misunderstanding what you saw. Hannah, you're a soldier. You see threats everywhere because that's how you were trained. But not everything is a battle." She left him there and moved to Commander June's room. Surely he would understand the danger they were in. But when she showed him the same evidence, his reaction was equally frustrating. "This is serious," he admitted. "We can't act on suspicion alone. If we're wrong, we'll destroy humanity's chance to join the galactic community. If we're right and we do nothing, we'll all be dead." Hannah replied. "We need more proof," June said. "Something that clearly shows hostile intent." Hannah moved through the vents to Ambassador Mira's room. The ambassador was preparing for another day of negotiations. She read the files carefully, but her response was the same as the others. "I understand your concerns," Mira said. "We have to consider the bigger picture. If we accuse them of planning to attack us, we'll look like the aggressive ones. We'll prove their point, that humans are too violent for civilized society." "What if they're planning to kill us tonight?" Hannah asked. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Mira replied. "But we can't start a conflict based on speculation." Hannah realized she was alone in this. Her fellow humans were so desperate to join the galactic community that they would rather risk death than appear aggressive. They had been conditioned to believe that violence was always wrong. There was always a peaceful solution. But Hannah had seen enough war to know that sometimes the only way to prevent greater violence was to act first. Was between looking like the aggressor and being dead. She spent the rest of the day gathering more intelligence. She learned that the Valkyrie had positioned additional ships around the station. She discovered that the communication systems would be shut down during tonight's ceremonial feast. She found evidence of a planned power failure that would disable the station's defenses. Everything pointed to an attack during the evening meal. The humans would be gathered in one place, surrounded by enemies with no way to call for help. As the sun set outside the station windows, Hannah made her decision. If her fellow humans wouldn't listen to reason, she would have to act alone. She began to prepare for war. She had limited weapons and no backup. The odds were impossible. But she had one advantage that the Valkyrie didn't expect. They saw her as a savage, a primitive creature driven by instinct rather than intelligence. They were about to learn that human instincts had kept the species alive for millions of years. And sometimes, those instincts were the difference between life and death. The ceremonial feast was about to begin. Hannah checked her weapons one last time and prepared to save her people. Whether they wanted to be saved or not, the aliens expected a savage. They were going to get one. The ceremonial feast hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow light across tables loaded with food from dozens of different worlds. Representatives from 12 species sat around the great circular table, With the humans placed as guests of honor, Hannah stood against the wall with the other security personnel, but her eyes never stopped moving. She had counted every exit, noted every weapon, and memorized the position of every potential threat. The Velkhari warriors were scattered around the room, but she could see the pattern in their placement. Ambassador Mira sat between Commander June and Dr. Lee, smiling as alien dignitaries offered toasts to friendship and cooperation. Devices worked perfectly, turning every language into smooth English words about peace and understanding. Today marks a new chapter in galactic history, Prime Executor Vex said, raising his glass. The humans have shown us that even the most distant species can find common ground. The other aliens nodded and raised their own glasses. But Hannah noticed that many of them looked nervous. Their eyes kept darting toward the exits, and several species kept their hands close to concealed weapons. Young Dong Yun stood near the kitchen entrance, monitoring the servers who brought food to the tables. He was the newest member of the human delegation, fresh from technical school and eager to prove himself. Earlier that day, he had quietly approached Hannah with troubling news. "I found something in the computer systems," he had whispered. "Communication. Jamming equipment. It's set to activate in 2 hours." Now, as the feast continued, Hannah saw him checking his watch nervously. If her calculations were correct, the jamming would begin in 30 minutes. Across the room, she noticed something else that made her blood run cold. A Velkhari female in military uniform was staring at the human table with what looked like regret. The alien's name was Captain Su Jin. She commanded one of the Velkhari security teams. But unlike the other Velkhari, Su Jin seemed troubled by what she was seeing. Her large black eyes kept moving between the laughing humans and her own people, as if she was trying to reconcile something that didn't make sense. Hannah had seen that look before, on the faces of soldiers who had been given orders they didn't want to follow. It was the look of someone who was beginning to question everything they believed. The feast continued with speech after speech about cooperation and friendship. Dr. Lee stood to present a gift from humanity, a small sculpture, representing the Tree of Life. As he spoke about growth and connection, Hannah noticed the Velkhari warriors shifting position. They were moving closer to the human table, but doing it slowly, casually. To anyone not watching carefully, it would look like they were simply enjoying the celebration. But Hannah could see the truth. They were surrounding their targets. She caught Dong's eye and nodded toward the nearest exit. He understood immediately and began moving in that direction. If things went wrong, at least one of them might escape to warn Earth. "The humans speak of peace," Prime Executor Vex said as Dr. Lee finished his presentation. "But we have studied their history. They are a violent species, prone to warfare and aggression. How can we trust them to be peaceful members of our council?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ambassador Mira stood to answer, but Hannah could see the trap being set. Whatever Mira said, it would be used to justify what came next. "Every species has a violent past," Mira said carefully. "We have learned from our mistakes. We seek to build a better future. Can a savage truly change its nature? Can a predator become peaceful?" The word savage hit Hannah like a physical blow. She had heard it whispered in the corridors, seen it in the eyes of aliens who looked at the humans. They didn't see diplomats or scientists. They saw dangerous animals that needed to be put down. Captain Su Jin suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Prime Executor, perhaps we should sit down, Captain," Dex said sharply. "This is not your concern." But Su Jin remained standing, her eyes fixed on the human table. "Sir, these are diplomats. Scientists, they have families, children. They came here in peace." "They came here as spies," Dex replied. "They want to learn our weaknesses so they can exploit them later." Hannah's hand moved to her weapon. Around the room, she could see the Velkhari warriors tensing, ready to act. In seconds, it would begin.
"You're wrong,"
Su Jin said, her voice growing louder. "I've read their files. These people are not soldiers. They're teachers, researchers, healers. They've spent their lives trying to make their world better. Enough! Dex roared. Forget your place, Captain. But his outburst had drawn attention to the growing tension. Several alien species began to look uncomfortable, sensing that something was wrong. The careful atmosphere of the feast was cracking. Hannah saw the moment when Dex made his decision. His hand moved to a concealed signal device, and she knew that attack was about to begin. "Myra," she shouted, drawing her weapon. "Get down." But it was too late. The nearest Valkyrie warrior lunged forward with a blade that seemed to appear from nowhere. Ambassador Mira turned toward Hannah's warning just as the weapon struck. Blood sprayed across the white tablecloth as Mira fell. The ceremonial hall erupted into chaos as more Valkyrie warriors revealed their weapons and attacked the stunned humans. Hannah fired her weapon, dropping the warrior who had killed Myra. Around her, the other alien species were screaming and running for the exits. But some of them were not running away from the violence. They were running toward it. Joining the attack, Commander June grabbed Dr. Lee and pulled him behind an overturned table. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. "They're trying to kill us," Hannah replied, firing at another attacker. "Just like I warned you." But even as she fought, part of her mind was focused on Captain Sujin. The Valkyrie female had drawn her own weapon. But instead of attacking the humans, she was firing at her own people. "This is wrong," Sujin shouted as she took cover behind a pillar. "These people are guests. This is murder." 3 more Valkyrie warriors surrounded Dr. Lee's position. Hannah moved to help him, but there were too many enemies and not enough cover. She could see Dong trying to reach the communication station. But Valkyrie soldiers were blocking his path. The ceremonial feast had become a slaughter, blood-stained. The beautiful decorations and the sounds of dying filled the air. But Hannah was not ready to give up. Not yet. She had been right about the trap. Now she had to prove that humans were more than just savages. They were survivors. The ceremonial hall had become a war zone. Hannah rolled behind an overturned table as energy blasts scorched the air where she had been standing. Around her, the surviving humans were fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. "Commander?" June pressed his back against a marble pillar, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "How many are left?" he shouted over the sound of weapons fire. 6 of us, Hannah replied, reloading her weapon. "Maybe 7 if Dong made it to the communication room." Dr. Lee crouched next to them, his hand shaking as he tried to stop the bleeding from a wound on his arm. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have listened to you." "Save the apologies for later," Hannah said. "Right now we need to survive." Captain Sujin appeared beside them, her Valkyrie uniform torn and bloodied. "There are more warriors coming," she said. "Dex has called for reinforcements. Why are you helping us?" June asked suspiciously. "Because this is wrong," Sujin replied. "You came here in peace. You offered friendship. We responded with murder." Another wave of Valkyrie soldiers entered the hall, weapons raised. Hannah counted at least 20 of them, far more than the humans could handle. But she had one advantage they didn't expect. "Sujin," she said, "can you get us to the communication center?" "It's heavily guarded," the Valkyrie captain replied. "But there's a maintenance tunnel that leads there." "Then that's our target," Hannah said. "We need to get word to Earth about what happened here." They moved through the chaos of the ruined hall, stepping over bodies and debris. The other alien species had either fled or joined the attack against the humans. Only a few seemed to be helping, and they were quickly overwhelmed. The maintenance tunnel was dark and narrow, barely wide enough for a single person. Hannah led the way, her weapon ready. Behind her, she could hear the others breathing heavily as they crawled through the metal passage. "Contact ahead," she whispered. Seeing light at the end of the tunnel, 2 Valkyrie guards stood outside the communication center, their weapons trained on the corridor. They didn't see the humans approaching from below until it was too late. Hannah and Sujin struck simultaneously, dropping both guards before they could raise an alarm. The communication center door was locked, but Sujin had the access codes inside. They found Dong Yun working frantically at the control panel. His face was covered in sweat, and his hands moved desperately across the alien controls. "The jamming is too strong," he said without looking up. "I can't break through." "What about the emergency beacon?" Hannah asked. "That might work," Dong said. But it will take time, and once I activate it, every Valkyrie on the station will know where we are. Do it, Hannah said. We'll hold them off.
Dongs?
Fingers flew across the controls as alarms began to sound throughout the station. The emergency beacon was designed to punch through any interference, sending a distress signal directly to Earth. Message sent, Dong announced. But it will take hours for help to arrive. Then we need to find a place to make our stand, Hannah said. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The Valkyrie had found them. This way, Sujin said, leading them toward a secondary exit. There's a secure area in the station's core. If we can reach it, we might be able to hold out. They ran through the corridors as energy blasts lit up the walls around them. More Valkyrie appeared at every turn, forcing them to change direction repeatedly. The station was a maze, and their enemies knew it better than they did. Here, Sujin said, stopping at a heavy blast door. This leads to the central command section. It's the most secure area on the station. She entered her access codes, and the door began to open. But as they rushed inside, Hannah realized they weren't alone. Prime Executor Thex stood in the center of the room, flanked by a dozen elite warriors. Captain Sujin, Dex said calmly, I am disappointed in you. You're one of our best officers. I was a fool, Sujin replied, raising her weapon. I believed in the lies you told about peace and civilization. The galaxy is peaceful because we removed the threats, Dex said. These humans are dangerous. They must be eliminated. Only danger here is you, Hannah said, stepping forward. You've been murdering innocent species for centuries. Innocent? Dex laughed. Look at yourself, human. You hold a weapon. You're covered in blood. Came here pretending to be peaceful. But your true nature shows through. I'm fighting to protect my people, Hannah said. You're killing them for sport. You're killing them because they're savages, Dex replied. Like all the others. The galaxy doesn't need more violent species. The battle that followed was brutal and desperate. Humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. But they fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Hannah moved through the enemy ranks like a force of nature. Every shot found its target. Every movement was calculated for maximum effect. She had trained for this her entire life, and now that training kept her people alive. Commander June fought beside her, his diplomatic training forgotten in the face of survival. Dr. Lee, despite his wounds, provided covering fire from behind a control console. Even Dong, young and inexperienced, stood his ground against the alien warriors. But it was Sujin who made the difference. She knew the Valkyrie fighting style, knew their weaknesses. She guided the humans' attacks, turning the tide of battle. Reinforcements are coming, she shouted over the sound of weapons fire. We need to move. Where? Hannah asked. We're trapped. The docking bay, Sujin replied. There's a ship there, if we can reach it, ... They fought their way through the station's corridors, leaving a trail of destruction behind them. The Valkyrie threw everything they had at the small group, but somehow they kept moving. When they finally reached the docking bay, Hannah saw something that made her heart leap. Human ships were approaching the station, their weapons charging for battle. Admiral Sung Ho, she whispered, recognizing the lead vessel. The cavalry has arrived. The truth was about to be revealed to the entire galaxy, and it was going to scream louder than any words ever could. The docking bay shook as the first human ships opened fire on the station's defenses. Through the massive viewport, Hannah could see the sleek forms of Earth's newest warships engaging the Valkyrie fleet. Admiral Sung Ho received our message. Commander, June said, his voice filled with hope for the first time since the attack began. But their celebration was short-lived. Prime Executor Thex's voice echoed through the station's communication system, reaching every species in the galaxy. Attention all council members, he announced. The humans have revealed their true nature. They attacked our peaceful station without provocation, murdered our diplomats during a ceremonial feast. This is proof that they are too dangerous to exist. Captain Sujin cursed in her own language. He's lying to everyone, making you look like the aggressors. The recordings, Dong said suddenly. The surveillance devices in our quarters. They'll have everything on file. Edited recordings. Su-jin replied grimly. They'll show only what makes humans look guilty. Through the viewport, more ships were arriving. But these weren't human vessels. They belonged to other council species, coming to defend the station against what they believed was an unprovoked human attack. We need to reach the central communication, Array Hannah said. If we can broadcast the real truth, show what actually happened. It's on the upper levels, Su-jin said. But the entire station is locked down. There are security checkpoints everywhere, and we fight our way through, Hannah said simply. The battle in space was growing more intense. Admiral Sung-ho's ships were outnumbered, fighting not just the Valkyrie, but also the combined fleets of species that believed they were defending innocent civilians. This is exactly what Dex wanted, Su-jin said bitterly. He's turned the entire galaxy against your people. They moved through the station's corridors, avoiding the main passages where Valkyrie soldiers hunted for them. The maintenance tunnels were their best option, but they were slow and dangerous. Contact ahead, Hannah whispered, seeing movement in the tunnel ahead of them. But these weren't Valkyrie soldiers. They were members of other species, civilians who had been caught in the fighting. They looked terrified, huddled together in the narrow space. Please don't hurt us, one of them begged. We're not soldiers. We're not going to hurt you, Dr. Lee said gently. We're trying to stop the fighting. You're the humans, another civilian said. The ones who started this war. We didn't start anything, Hannah said. The Valkyrie attacked us during a peace ceremony. They're the ones who've been killing innocent species for centuries. The civilians looked confused. The broadcasts say you're murderers. The broadcasts are lies, Su-jin said, stepping forward. I am Captain Su-jin of the Valkyrie security forces. I witnessed the attack. The humans were defending themselves.
Ouch.
Words carried weight. The civilians had heard of her, knew her reputation for honesty. Slowly, doubt began to creep into their expressions. Show them, Hannah said to Dong. Show them what we found in the databases. Dong connected his portable device to the tunnel's communication panel. The files appeared on small screens, showing the truth about the Valkyrie's previous attacks.
I'll tell you.
Species, one of the civilians whispered. All destroyed. It's all eliminated because they might have challenged Valkyrie control, Su-jin added. The humans are just the latest targets. The civilians began to understand. They had been living under the rule of monsters who disguised themselves as peacekeepers. The realization was devastating. We have to help them, one of the civilians said. We have to tell everyone the truth. The communication array, Hannah said. If we can reach it together, ... They moved as a group now, humans and aliens working. Together against their common enemy, civilians knew shortcuts through the station. Passages that weren't monitored by security systems. But as they climbed toward the upper levels, they encountered more resistance. Valkyrie soldiers were everywhere, and they weren't just targeting humans anymore. They were attacking anyone who questioned their authority. They're killing witnesses, Su-jin said, as they watched a squad of Valkyrie warriors gun down a group of fleeing civilians. Anyone who might contradict their story, the true nature of the Valkyr, was finally being revealed. They weren't the peaceful leaders of galactic civilizations. They were tyrants who maintained power through fear and murder. The communication array is just ahead, one of the civilians said, but it's heavily guarded. Hannah studied the situation. 24 Valkyrie soldiers surrounded the communication center, with more arriving every minute. It was a suicide mission. I'll create a distraction, she said. Draw them away from the entrance. That's suicide, June protested. Maybe, Hannah said. But it's the only way to get the truth out. I'm going with you, Su-jin said. It's my people's crimes that need to be exposed. And me, Dr. Lee added. I may not be a soldier, but I can help. They split up, with Hannah's group attacking from the front, while Dong and the others tried to reach the communication array from behind. The plan was desperate, but it was their only chance. The battle was fierce. Hannah moved through the enemy ranks like a whirlwind of destruction, her weapons finding their targets with deadly precision. Su-jin fought beside her, turning her knowledge of Valkyrie tactics against her own people. But it was Dr. Lee who made the crucial difference. As the others fought, He slipped past the guards and reached the communication controls. His fingers flew across the panels, broadcasting the truth. To every corner of the galaxy, the real recordings played on screens throughout Council space. The unprovoked attack on the humans. The murder of Ambassador Mira. The systematic elimination of other species over the centuries. And most importantly, the voices of Valkyrie leaders discussing their plans. Using words like savage and elimination and final solution, the galaxy watched in horror as the truth was revealed.
Ow.
The Valkyrie weren't protectors of peace. They were genocidal murderers who had been hiding behind a mask of civilization. In space, the battle began to turn. Ships from other species stopped, firing on the humans and turned their weapons on the Valkyrie fleet. The tide of war was shifting, but the cost was enormous. The station was falling apart around them, damaged by the fighting. Emergency systems were failing and the artificial gravity was flickering. "We need to get to the escape pods," Sujin said. "The station won't hold together much longer." As they fought their way toward the evacuation areas, Hannah realized that everything had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. The truth had been revealed, and it was screaming louder than any words ever could. 6 months after the Battle of Station Harmony, Hannah Kim stood before the reformed Galactic Council. The Great Chamber looked different now. The circle of species was smaller, but the atmosphere was honest in a way it had never been before. The Valkyrie Empire had crumbled in the weeks following the revelation of their crimes. Some Valkyrie, like Captain Sujin, had joined the new coalition government. Others had fled to the Outer Rim, becoming pirates and raiders, but their stranglehold on galactic politics was broken forever. "The Council recognizes Hannah Kim of Earth," the new speaker announced, "hero of the Battle of Station Harmony and defender of galactic freedom." Hannah stepped forward, wearing the simple uniform of a human diplomat. The scars on her face and arms told the story of that terrible day when everything changed. "I stand before you not as a hero," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I stand as someone who did what was necessary when everyone else was too afraid to act." Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species listened. Many of them had been complicit in the Valkyrie's crimes, either through active participation or willful ignorance. They were trying to make amends now, but the guilt would stay with them forever. "You called us savages," Hannah continued. "You saw our weapons and our willingness to fight, and you decided we were dangerous. But the real danger was your own refusal to see the truth." Commander June sat in the human delegation, his hair now gray from the stress of the past months. Beside him, Dr. Lee wore the medal of the new Council's Order of Truth, awarded to those who had risked their lives to expose the Valkyrie conspiracy. Young Dong-Yoon had become something of a celebrity, his technical skills having made the crucial broadcast possible. He was now working with the Council's new Transparency Committee, ensuring that such deceptions could never happen again. "The Valkyrie weren't evil because they were violent," Hannah said. "They were evil because they were cowards. They killed their enemies in secret, using lies and manipulation instead of facing them honestly." Captain Sujin stood at the back of the chamber, wearing the uniform of the new Galactic Security Force. She had been instrumental in hunting down the remaining Valkyrie war criminals, her knowledge of their methods proving invaluable. "We humans are not perfect," Hannah admitted. "We are capable of great violence, just as you suspected. But we are also capable of great sacrifice. We'll fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We will stand up to bullies even when it costs us everything." The chamber was completely silent. These beings had spent centuries believing that civilization meant avoiding conflict at all costs. They had thought that peace was the absence of violence rather than the presence of justice. "The galaxy is safer now," Hannah said. "Not because we eliminated violence, but because we eliminated the lie that violence is always wrong. Sometimes, the only way to protect the innocent is to fight for them." Admiral Sung-ho entered the chamber, his dress uniform decorated with the ribbons of the Liberation Campaign. His fleet had spent months tracking down Valkyrie holdouts and freeing the species they had enslaved. "The final Valkyrie stronghold has fallen," he announced. "The war is over." A cheer went up from the assembled delegates, but Hannah felt no joy in the victory. Too many had died. Too many species had been destroyed before the truth was revealed. "What do you want from us now?" asked the representative. "Of the Corvex, one of the species that had been secretly controlled by the Valkyrie. How can we make amends for what we allowed to happen?" "Don't make amends to us," Hannah said. "Make amends to the 17 species that were wiped out. Make sure their stories are remembered. Make sure this never happens again." She turned to address the entire chamber. "You want to know what makes humans different? It's not that we're more violent or more peaceful than anyone else. It's that we remember our mistakes. We learn from them. We try to do better. When we fail, when we become the monsters we're fighting, we have people like Hannah Kim to remind us who we're supposed to be," Dr. Lee added from the human delegation. The Speaker of the Council stood. "The new Galactic Charter is ready for signing. It includes provisions for the protection of minority species, transparency in government, and the right of any member to challenge Council decisions. Most importantly," Admiral Sung-ho said, "it includes the right to defend oneself.
Ow.
No species will ever again be forbidden from maintaining adequate defenses." The signing ceremony was simple but profound. Each species placed their mark on the charter, promising to uphold the new principles of freedom and justice. As the ceremony concluded, Hannah found herself standing alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of dangers. There would always be those who sought to exploit the weak and control the strong, Captain. Su-jin joined her at the viewing window. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. "This new system we've built, for a while," Hannah said, "until people forget why we built it, till they decide that peace is more important than justice. And then someone will have to remind them," Hannah said. "Someone will have to be the savage again." She touched the scar on her cheek, remembering the moment when Ambassador Mira had died, the moment when she had realized that sometimes the only way to save civilization was to fight for it. "The galaxy called us savages," she said quietly.
They were right.
But they didn't understand what that meant. A savage is someone who refuses to be civilized into submission. Someone who fights when fighting is necessary, even when everyone else has given up. "The galaxy needed a savage," Su-jin said. "The galaxy will always need savages," Hannah replied. "As long as there are those who would prey on the weak, there must be those willing to stand against them." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. In the distance, human ships patrolled the space lanes, protecting the trade routes that connected the free worlds. It was a new age, built on the foundation of truth and defended by the willingness to fight for what was right. The savage's gift to the galaxy was not peace. It was the courage to face hard truths and the strength to act on them. It was the understanding that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization was to be willing to abandon it, and in the darkness between the stars, that gift would be needed again.